And we're back. Or we're here for the first time, depending.
Hey, good to
Hello.
go?
Good to go. Let's do this.
All right. Hi, I'm Brian Gerhardt, part of the Iowa Des Moines IGDA chapter, Des Moines chapter. I'll get that right someday. Today we have a fantastic presentation. We have immersive game music by Pär Svensson. It's going to be fantastic. So hold one moment. I promise I'll get him to you. I will bore you with things now, and you'll be getting to the excitement later. So let's talk about us real quick. So the Des Moines chapter, we are a group of individuals who have an interest in games and game development. It's not only for developers; it's for designers, for artists, anybody who is part of that game development uh, cycle. So if you're interested in finding a job, finding others of the same interest, come find us. Come talk to us. Come chat with us on our Slack channel. Chat with us on Twitter. Just stay connected. Facebook, all the other different social platforms. Once you join Slack, you're also going to find that we have a Minecraft server. So come and join us and play on there as well. Uh, we also have the mothership on Discord. So we do have a Discord. What do you call that? A Discord channel within the IGDA's Discord server. So go take a look there. Everybody is welcome. Anybody, everybody, young, old, in the middle. Hey, you're all welcome here. Um, Last thing to talk about real quick is take a look at the IGDA membership. So getting a membership for IGDA helps us. Helps us so we can grow in numbers, get a little more. Uh, what am I trying to say? A little more publicity over time, but it can also help us get prizes and such. Last month, we were able to give away a fantastic game that was put together with the help of Tara Newton. Uh, the winner actually may be out there watching this right now, and I'm hoping you're really enjoying the game. I don't remember what it's called right now. I put it in the mail. It's gone. Uh, Go take a look at the IGDA membership benefits. We do have them up here on the screen. Access to knowledge, the huge community advocacy for games, and it's it is a fantastic group of individuals. Part of discounts, I brought it up last week. If you're into Unity development, you do get a discount with your Unity membership just by joining IGDA. So contact one of us if you have any further questions. There's a link right there so you can take a look at it. So, Evie, did I miss anything today?
No, I think you hit on all of it.
Okay, sweet. On that note, uh, I'm gonna just give a quick introduction to Par. So Par is into music. I learned yesterday. Par was a teacher, and Par is somebody who is very musically sound that I will be keeping in my back pocket because he's a wonderful individual. And um, here he is. Let's go ahead and talk about immersive game music. So if you do have any questions, please put them over there. Par is looking for anything and everything that you have about game music and theory. He is. We're just going to call him the expert, but I know he's humble. Uh, so add questions here. Add questions in Slack. So there you go. Welcome, Par.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I think first of all, it's really nice that you have this game developer association going. I've been to a couple of the meetings when they were still taking place in person, and I had a great time. It's just wonderful to see how people are supporting each other, you're teaching each other, and just making friends. So I like it. I hope we can get back to those in-person meetings soon. Lots of fun, good food too. So I was asked by Karen Weiss a while ago. We met at a party, I think. There were costumes involved, so it must have been Halloween probably. To speak at that time. The game that I'll be discussing a little bit here, Oddmar, had just been released, I think, for iOS, for the iPhone. Yeah, she wanted me to come talk a little bit about game music in general and about my experience writing the music for this game. So I know that most of you that come to these meetings are probably not. You might be musicians maybe, but your main interest might not be in composing music for video games. So I'm going to try to set this up so that, by kind of sharing the process that we went through with this game and my experience, that maybe I can spark some more interest in working more closely with composers and musicians for the projects that you're involved in. So I think that's my goal with this little presentation. And like Ryan said, please, if you have any questions, I think this will be more fun if you bring those up. I could just derail completely too, and then you'll have to reel me back in. So yeah, so let's get started. I'm not going to talk too much about myself because I am Swedish and it's very uncomfortable for our kind. But you probably noticed that I do have an accent. So I grew up in Sweden, and I've been into music my whole life, mostly as a performer. So I'm a guitar player. That is me in the picture in the middle with long hair. Lost my train of thought. Yes, so I'm from Sweden. I ended up in the US because you have this absolutely amazing college here in Boston. It's called the Berklee College of Music, which is really, really, it's an institution for contemporary music. It's probably the best place in the world to go to if you have an interest in jazz, film scoring, pop, rock. So I moved there in 2012 to study music performance, actually guitar performance. And I realized as, the semesters went by that I actually was probably more interested in composing. And Berklee, they have the list of teachers there. It is just, it is a very inspiring environment to be in. They have a film scoring major that you can take, and they also have a video game scoring minor that I did not take, but I got to interact with some of the people that were into that, and also, some of the teachers that would teach the film scoring classes may have taught harmony and counterpoint, ear training, or whatever it was. So I had quite a lot of exposure there. So I also met my wife while I was in Boston, and that's actually how I ended up in Des Moines, of all places. So we moved back to Sweden after I was done studying in Boston, and I helped start up this school. It is a high school, and in Sweden you get to, as a student in high school, you get to hone in and focus much more on what you're interested in. So this was kind of a school that had a big focus on music, and I taught ear training, harmony, a little bit of ensemble and composition there too. So that's kind of my background as a teacher. Eventually my wife got a little homesick and we moved to Des Moines. Just quickly too, so Oddmar is by far the biggest project that I've worked on. Previously, I've done some work for smaller projects, or I've had a smaller role in some projects, and Merge was one of those. It's an iPhone game that came out quite a while ago, and Wild Frontiera is a Western-themed game that I worked on, and there are some others too, but Oddmar is definitely the big one so far. And I'm currently busy working on the next title from Mobge, which is the Turkish indie game developer that was behind Oddmar. So, all right. So a little bit about the game before we start talking about the music here. So I'll show some footage and stuff so you can get a feeling for what kind of game this is, unless you didn't get a chance to check it out yet. So this little text here, I think, is straight from the App Store. They're running a run and jump platformer, Oddmar, from the indie team behind the acclaimed Leo's Fortune, takes the genre to new heights with a charming, hilarious storyline steeped in Norse mythology. Oddmar is truly an epic adventure. So this was originally developed for the iPhone, so it's a little bit of a shorter game. It's about 5 hours, I think, in total gameplay. However, it has, I added this up once, over 90 minutes of music, which is pretty rare for a game of that length. I think I read somewhere, and I don't know how to, well, you can trust this, but that the average amount of music in a game that has this amount of gameplay in it might be 15 minutes. So it really does stick out a little bit with the music. Last time I checked too, we had about 1 million plus downloads on Google Play. I'm not sure about the numbers for iPhone, but it has done fairly well, especially considering all the competition that is out there. When you think about how many apps that are just coming out every day and week, especially on Google Play, I think they just let anything through. But I read somewhere, I think it's over 100,000 a month on Google Play, and those are apps. So I don't know what percentage would be games, but I bet it's 20% maybe or something like that. I have no idea, but it's hard. So as we'll talk more about this, but I think one reason that this game was somewhat successful is that the team behind it and everyone that was kind of involved, like the satellites around it, like me, were just really dedicated to quality, and I think that helped a lot. Just some more quick facts. So Mobge is the Turkish game developer. It's a small team, although I think they have expanded recently. When Oddmar was developed, I think they had 5 people working for them, plus me. It was co-produced by Senri. That's a company that they're Swedish, and they were behind the Leo's Fortune that some of you may be familiar with. It's another mobile title. I think the main protagonist is a little furry ball with has some real character to it. So, but it's a fun game too. Senri, I think, also is about quality, so they're a good match for Mobge. Yep. So as of now, I think the game is available for iOS, Android, Nintendo Switch. Recently, it was released on, and also Mac OS. And I saw someone sent me a random video of an arcade machine that had the game on it too.
Oh, wow.
I don't know much about that, but apparently there's some kind of, I think it's a Kickstarter project, and Oddmar will be on that arcade machine. So that's fun. Another thing that helped the game, I think, was that the developers had a good relationship with Apple from the start, and they were awarded the Apple Design Award in 2018. So that was big. They got a huge bump from that. And also Touch Arcade game, they got the Game of the Year award the same year. Wow. Other things that I think were really good for the game was the voice acting. So Julian Casey does all the voice acting in the game, and he's in a lot of, I think he has more supportive characters, but he's in Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, Deus Ex, and a long list of AAA games. So really fun to have him be a part of the game too. The story was by Frank Gibson, who I think works on, you'll see this game is very cartoon-like. I think he's done some work for Nickelodeon or some Cartoon Network too, so that was big. The artwork, also a big part of the game, by Vulcan and Oaken, the coolest name ever, I think. Also helped a lot. and the main programmer and developer, Oscar and Farhat, also really nice people to work with. So good team and really fun to be a part of that. Okay, so before I start talking about the music a little bit more here, I just wanted to show you the trailer so you can get a feeling for the artwork, the cutscenes. They're a big part of the game, and also the gameplay. Yeah, let's just watch this. Unless you have any questions, Brian or Karen.
Have any questions that have come through yet, but keeping my eye on it.
All right, let's play the trailer. Be quiet.
You do not deserve a place in Valhalla, Oddmar. One last chance is given to you, so that you may redeem yourself. Make your people proud. But if you fail, all is lost.
All right, hopefully you guys could hear that. We had some issues with the different audio levels here before, but let me know if I need to make any adjustments on my end, Evie. And
Yeah. No, I think we were great on that. So.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm going to share the link to the trailer also in case anybody wants to check it out.
Great. Thank you, Brian. So as you can see, let's just start from the beginning. So the kind of the cutscenes here in the trailer they appear just the way they do in the game. So it's this kind of semi-animated style. It's almost like a what do you call it? Cartoon, still kind of frame with a little bit of stuff moving in it. So beautifully rendered, and everything is hand drawn, I think. But the music really plays an important role. We'll talk more about that later because they are kind of static, and that maybe changes a little bit how you approach the music. So the cutscenes and then the gameplay. You know, it's if anyone has played Rayman, you can probably tell where some of the influences came from here. I think both in terms of the game mechanics, the gameplay, but also the art style. It's very inspired by Rayman. It's a simple platformer, you know, but really polished, and there's some scattered puzzles and stuff in there. And I know they spent a lot of time just working on the controls of the game to make sure that would really have a nice flow. People still seem to be a little frustrated just because it's a mobile game, and it's never going to be the same as having a real controller, you know. But all right, so let's skip ahead. So I thought I would split this little talk here into two halves, and talk about some of these are just general concepts that I happen to like and that you could probably apply to any game, but I'll try to bring it back to specifically how this relates to the process of writing music for the game and implementing it. So
we
the two halves, I think, are
question. I apologize. I know you were wanting to get some questions in there. So
yeah.
I'm gonna cut in real quick. So Jesse Benson, which is awesome. We've been seeing comments from them about how they're a musician, designer, and software developer. So super stoked. But they had one question about: did you have a lot of leeway in terms of musical direction, or did your team have a really specific vision for what they were wanting?
Right.
for Oddmar?
That is a perfect question. Actually, that leads us into this slide here that I'm on right now. So I'll hit all of that, I think, in a second here. So just stepping back a little bit here. So just to give me a chance to collect my thoughts. So I think we'll split this up into two halves. So one will be kind of more musical ideas and the purely musical side of how we went about putting this together. And then the other half will look at some of the technical, you know, the ways of implementing this music technically and what tools and options we had there. And we'll keep it at a pretty basic level, but yeah, that's my plan. So going back to this question about how much freedom I had. So before we did anything, before I wrote a single note or recorded anything or anything like that, we had some good talks and sessions about what the concept would be, which I think is a really good way to start. It's easy just to rush into things and then do a bunch of work that gets tossed away later. So we spent a lot of time just talking about the genre and style, maybe what the audience expectations were for the game. And this is it was pretty easy to make these decisions for this game. It's a cartoon-like game about a Viking. So I think we decided on two big things. One was that we were going to try to bring in some actual traditional instruments from Scandinavia. And the second thing was just because of the cartoon character of the game and the cutscenes and the story, that we wanted it to be sort of an orchestral hybrid score too, just to give it more of a cinematic feeling. So going back to the traditional instruments, so this was like, this job was made for me. So my background as a performer is largely actually playing in groups in Sweden, the traditional music. So I happen to know a lot of people that play that style of music, and I'm comfortable. I play guitar. It's not the most exotic instrument, but I still could contribute some. I could record myself, and there's a lot of guitar on there. So in the end, I think we ended up with this instrument that you see on the right side here. This is my friend Anders, and he plays an old instrument. It's not from the Viking age. It's more from the medieval age. I don't think we really know what the Vikings, I don't know what they had. Some horns and some drums maybe. I don't think they were, probably not too sophisticated, but it's an old instrument. It's called the keyed fiddle, or the nyckelharpa. And it is a large violin-like instrument that, instead of pressing down the strings with your fingers on the fretboard, you have keys. You can kind of see a couple of them here that you press down. And then it also has a lot of resonating strings underneath. I think it only has 3 strings that you can play on, but then it has many, many more underneath that just kind of resonate with the strings that you're physically touching and playing. So a lot of traditional instruments are like that. The Hardangerfela, I think they used that in Lord of the Rings. That's from Norway. It's the same thing, but that actually looks like a violin, and then it just has a bunch of added strings to it. So that was super fun to get to work with my friend on this project and to incorporate that. We'll listen to some of the stuff so you can hear what this sounds like the instrument too. And then the other live instrument that we brought in was just guitar and some various stringed, kind of strummed instruments that I can play a little bit. So I think there's a banjo in there for one piece of music, and also a dulcimer. Yep. Other decisions that we had to talk about ahead of time was, like I just touched this a little bit, instrumentation. So we had the live instruments, and then because we wanted this lush, kind of Hollywood-like cinematic score. So you need a symphony orchestra, and we were nowhere near having the budget for a symphony orchestra. So what you do these days is that you use virtual instruments, VSTs, and you kind of record all the instruments and program them on your computer to make them sound as realistic as possible. So that's what we ended up with, a mix of live recordings, which I think is always great. If you only do sampled instruments, I don't know, one bad thing about that is that you're using the same libraries as other people, so it can tend to sound a little bit like generic. So it's always good to bring live musicians and live instruments into the recording. So I wrote here, create a DAW template. So I thought this would be a good way to just start looking at some of the music. This, I think, so I don't know if people know what a DAW is. It's a digital audio workstation. So that's basically the software that you use these days on a computer for recording music, for sequencing music with MIDI and virtual instruments like we just talked about, and also you use it to mix. Mix is the broad term for it. Mix and master your music. So let's just take a look. I've preloaded. These tracks it can take, with my computer, a long time to load up. So I've preloaded something for us.
While you're going over there, I have to say that's impressive. Honestly, I wasn't thinking about it having live music and the virtual music, the combination of both. Do you know about what percent of live compared to virtual that you are working with at the end?
There's a live instrument on every, I think just about every cue. So cue would be like a shorter musical section or longer, but a coherent musical section or part. Maybe there might be some things in the cutscenes where the music tends to be more like an underscore. So it's kind of supposed to be more in the background, and then you can get away with stuff like that more. But there's at least one. It's almost like a matter of principle. I put in something live in every cue. But if you're asking about percentage, I guess you can look at it. Okay, so if you look at this track, it has 72 tracks on it, and I can see 2 live instruments on there. So not a high percentage there. But that's because we're trying to emulate a big orchestra. So, and I don't have 18 violinists for the first section sitting in my living room. So, yeah, good question though. But I really like bringing in at least one live instrument just to give it some character and imperfection too. It's really funny when you're working with these sampled libraries. A lot of time, what you're trying to do is actually try to make it sound not too perfect, so that it has some kind of human quality to it. Okay, so let's just take a quick. Maybe we can listen to parts of this, and then we can just talk a little bit brief. I don't want to spend too much time on this because if you're a developer or something, this is not what you're going to be looking at. Although it is very similar to something that everyone that I think is involved in a game, in my opinion, should have some knowledge about, and that's like the Fmod or Vice, the middleware that you can use to integrate audio into your game. That looks very, very similar to this interface here. You sort of have multiple tracks that are going horizontally that are stacked on each other that play at the same time. And then on the horizontal axis, that's kind of your time, you know. So you start, this is the beginning of the track. Obviously, this is probably super. I'm not so uncertain about how to talk about this because I've spent probably 10,000 hours staring at this software, so I just don't know what people make of this, if it's super obvious or not. But yeah, so left to right is back and you go start to finish of a track. Up and down is just the different layers or different instruments that you have playing at the same time, or they can be, you know, staggered too. But so this, the whole reason actually I loaded this up was because we were going to talk about temp tracks. So this is sort of what the temp track looked for this game. So we decided, okay, it's a symphony orchestra. So I loaded up all of these different instruments that are part of the symphony orchestra. Not all of them. I think the real template here actually has 180 tracks in it, but my computer would kill itself if we tried to play this in the Zoom meeting right now. So this is a little smaller queue here, but you still get, you know, the different sections of the orchestra. You have the strings section here, and I can put these in groupings. You have the woodwinds, although it looks like we only have flute for this track. You have the brass section and the different pitched percussion that I chose for this. And then we have, this is a little bit more, some more creative choices were made here. This is the percussive section. So that had to have more like a, you know, traditional Viking-like character, whatever that is. And then you have my live guitar down here. So by just kind of not before we even wrote anything, we just brought these instruments in. That's just a good way to start, like, to have some stylistic direction. I don't know if that's how you say that, but and to make sure that you have some continuity and unity in the game. So this temp track, I've tried, and you always deviate from it a little bit, but if as I'm writing my next track and the next one, I try to stick to this template of instruments so that the music will sound like it belongs to the same world and the same game. Does that make sense?
Always.
Okay, so enough talking. Let's just listen to one of these, and then I'll just show how you can solo and mute the different sections so people will just know what that is. Okay, here we go. I should say what this is too. So this is a funny track. So it's called Flight of the Squirrel or something like that. So in the game you have these different companion animals that you get to control for certain levels. So this is some kind of flying squirrel, and I gave it sort of like a superhero like quality to it, but then it has the keyed fiddle, which has probably never been done before in a superhero theme, and my guitar is featured quite prominently too, just to give it more of a folky sound. So let's just listen to a little bit of it. And are you ready with the audio levels?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. think we're gonna stop there. We don't have to listen to the whole thing, but you get the vibe. I like this track, so I thought we could just, since we talked about the keyed fiddle a little bit, we can just listen to this in solo. This is the Nyckelharpa. So this is the individual live recording that was made, and we can solo that and only listen to it. You may have noticed that I tried to turn that up a little bit so you would hear it more when we play the music. That's what I was doing before. But let's just solo this so you can get a feeling for what this keyed fiddle sound like. It might be useful. Sounds like it's kind of like a slightly more aggressive violin that is in a giant chamber or something because of the resonator strings. I really like it. So this is useful, I think, for a developer just to know how this works, again, because when you're working in your middleware, Fmod or Weiss, you'll be looking at something similar, or although you'll never end up with a situation where you have probably this many individual instruments and tracks. So what I'll do before I hand this off to whoever is integrating it, or if I'm integrating it myself, I'll try to combine these different groups. It could be in like, maybe I'll do, it depends on what you want to do with the music, but maybe I'll do the strings. So I'll bounce those together so that they're just one track. Or I could do, maybe I could do like a percussive layer separately, and have the kind of more pad-like, slow evolving chords on a different layer. It depends on what you want to do with the music in the game and in the middleware engine. But we can listen to one more thing just to get the point here. So we can combine, obviously we could, if we wanted, I think in the game, there's not a whole lot of manipulation of this. It basically just plays through. There might be an intro or something that gets taken out, and then the rest is looped, but there's not a whole lot going on here. But we could, because this is so clearly, written in sections, we could just, for example, choose to listen only to the guitar and the keyed fiddle. It would sound like this. Work together just like that. Yeah, so that was a long explanation for what a DAW template is. Really useful, I think, to kind of play around with that, and anyone can have an opinion about that, right? So it doesn't only have to be the musician. You can talk. This is very traditional. It's just, mostly orchestral stuff, but for some scores you might choose to bring in a lot of different strange sounds that you want to be a part of the character of the game, or you might create your own instruments, even like virtual instruments. That's common too. Let me get back to my slides so I can back on track here. Okay, one more thing. Sorry, this is how we're doing on time. Oh no. I'm on my second slide. Okay, I'll try to speed it up. I just want to say one more thing about these virtual instruments that I think is really important. So one thing to be aware of, if you want to use a virtual sample library like the one I'm using here for all my symphonic instruments. This is, by the way, this is East, it's not East-West, Hollywood Strings and Hollywood Brass, and it's from a company called East-West. So something to be aware of is that whether you're asking a composer to write with and for a virtual orchestra like this, or you ask him to write for a live orchestra, that will really change the outcome of the music, because when you're writing with virtual instruments, just a individual kind of characteristics and features of that library will kind of steer you and trap you in ways, because you might have something in mind, but the library can't make that sound good. And there are some things that all libraries, virtual libraries, that they always kind of sound good, and that would be usually these kind of short attacks. Like this is what is this? Violas. Let's grab a random example. This is Peccato Violas. Sounds like this. That type of short attack, that sounds usually pretty realistic and good. So people tend to use that a lot if they're writing for orchestra. Other things that sound good, I'm just using the strings now for as an example. So really long notes on the violins or the string section are also pretty easy, or relatively easy to have them sound good. With some programming and sequencing, you can make that sound pretty realistic. What's hard is usually everything in between. So something that has a really sharp attack and fast, or is really slow, but something in between. Those are harder to make those sound good. So you tend to end up with a lot of dun 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 dun, which is what a lot of movie scores sound like now too, because people have started to overuse that, and I'm guilty of it too. But it sounds good in these libraries, so you end up with more music like that. If you have a live orchestra, you have no limits. Like they can, if they're good players, still make anything sound good, as long as it makes sense. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that real quick. Let's move on. Yeah, this is pretty obvious too. Temp Tracks, we use some of that. So going back to the previous question too about what kind of freedom I had. So they eventually let me do anything I wanted, but in the beginning, they gave me a lot of references, and those could be hard to interpret sometimes. It's hard to know when you're talking to someone that is not a musician and they hand you pieces of music and composition, and they like it, but they don't really know why, and you're just trying to figure out what is it that you like about this specifically. So communication is really important when you're handing off a temp track or a reference track to a musician or a composer. Just try to at least narrow it down a little bit. It's also good to talk about during this phase when you develop a concept about things that you don't like. So, some people just hate saxophones. I don't know why. Maybe they were bullied by one. I don't know. But so no matter what you do, if you have a saxophone in there, they're gonna hate it. And it's such an easy thing to change, maybe. But it's good to tell the composer what you like, and try to be specific. And also if there are things that you just do not like to hear.
I think I've found in the past that one of the hardest parts of commissioning someone to compose something for a game or anything else is just the language that you have to build around it, because it is so different, and everybody has different words for why they like something about a piece of music or something like that. And your point of communicating, do you have any tricks or things that you've come across in developing that language with someone else who has that vested interest in the outcome of the music?
I don't know if I have. It is hard. You learn to try to guess a little bit what it is that people like, but I guess try to not. I think people that are not musicians that are actively used to actively listening to music, they tend to think more in terms of feelings, which is so subjective and not very helpful sometimes. So I don't know, just try to get more specific. Try to listen like, I like the way this violin does something here, or I like maybe the harmony here. Yeah, it is hard though. I don't know if I have a good advice other than just try to narrow it down a little bit to make it easier for the composer. All right, next slide. Oh, I threw in this is a close-up of the amazing keyed fiddle that I actually ran over with my car once, believe it or not. It was in a case though, so it made it somehow. But yeah, it's a cool instrument. Okay, so let's listen to some more music. So we're still on the musical side of things here, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about two things that I think were really important to making this score, the music, work for this game. So one is this concept of leitmotifs, and then also orchestration. And just real quickly, leitmotif, that's, I mean, it's German, I believe. It means a lead motif. And it's just this, you know, theoretical concept of having it could be any length really, but typically a pretty short, could be long too, but a melody or a fragment of a melody or a little germ of an idea that you assign to a character in the game or in the movie. This game has both because it cutscenes and the video game as well. You can assign it to a character or maybe I don't know, an object or the relationship between characters in the story, or just an idea maybe. So there are lots of these that are just scattered all over the score for this game, but I chose these 5 and so we could listen to them. So the first one is the main leitmotif, which also is the main theme, I guess. So a theme song and a leitmotif, they're very closely related. Theme song is maybe a little less complicated. It's just a piece of music that plays the beginning of a game or whatever it is. The leitmotif usually involves more manipulation and kind of, you know, making the music fit to what is going on. Okay, so we have Oddmar. He's the protagonist, obviously. We'll listen to his theme. And we also have this mysterious mushroom force as part of the game that I also gave a theme, much like John Williams gave the Force in Star Wars a theme. I gave the mushroom force theme in this game. We have this cool sidekick here, the boar, that got a fun theme too. He shows up in a couple of places, and you can ride him and smash things in those levels. And then we have a fairy that shows up in the game in a couple of places, so she gets a theme or a leitmotif as well. And then we have, of course, it's Vikings. We have Loki, the bad guy. Okay, so I know we are running out of time, so let's try to move a little bit more quickly here. What do you think about time, guys? We're almost at an hour.
Well, and I just posted up in our YouTube channel too. All of our presentations are posted up later for people to view. So if for some reason someone needed to head out right at 7, that's totally fine, and they can come back and watch the rest of it later. But if people are learning and jamming on what we're talking about, I think we should keep going. So yeah.
Well, just let me know if you guys need to leave.
Nope, we're here.
Be me eventually.
This is great.
Talking to no one. Okay, so I think I thought I loaded up the project, but it looks like it crashed. Let's try it again. Ah, here we go. Ah, no. Okay, it worked. Perfect. Okay, we'll just really quickly listen to a few of these leitmotifs here, or the themes. So first, we have Oddmar's theme, which in the title screen and the kind of world selection screen of the game, the theme actually gets presented 2 times, or the leitmotif. So first, it's kind of this more somber variation that has some brass in it, I think. And then later, you'll hear it come back, and then it's played on the keyed fiddle, and it's a little bit more upbeat, or like what you would expect in Koji Kondo, like a Mario Zelda type game when you're looking at the world. So yes, let's listen to this real quick. So, there we go. This is the main leitmotif for Oddmar. It has another section, but we can stop there. So you heard the kind of somber, more serious brass version in the beginning, and then it gets manipulated a little bit. It's not the exact same melody, which is really a key concept of leitmotifs, I think, is that you can mold them to fit the narrative and to support whatever is going on. So in Oddmar, I'm doing that both for the cutscenes, especially for the cutscenes. They're everywhere in there. But also for the gameplay, depending on how intense the level is, the gameplay, I kind of rearrange and rewrite the motif a little bit. Okay, so let's just stick with Oddmar since we're at talking about him. So let's watch, yes, I said that right. Let's watch a cutscene where the leitmotif again gets transformed. See if you can catch it. I guess it's very, very obvious, but let's just play it and see if you can catch that. So the main melody is that da dum da dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum ba ba da da dum bum bum, and more or less gets repeated like that. So that gets thrown in twice during this cutscene that we're gonna watch here. This has the voiceover too, so hopefully you can still hear the music. Here we go.
Vikings, the greatest warriors ever known, feared and admired across the realm. Ready to fight once more for the glory and prosperity of their people. This particular village was home to 2 young Vikings, Vasker and Oddmar, destined for greatness by decree of the gods themselves. Unfortunately, the gods did not tell them of this plan. Just as he had countless times before, Oddmar farewelled his parents. They always returned to him. This time was different.
You guys hear the music there, or was it just being overpowered by the voice?
No, definitely. Definitely hear it. That's really interesting. And was that composed specifically for the trailer then?
So that's actually that's not the trailer. That's just the one of the first cutscenes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep.
Yep. Um, it may have been in a trailer too. I'm not sure, but it is in the game too, in one of the opening sequences. So yeah, I have the music taken out here, so we can just listen to it a little bit more closely. So that main theme or leitmotif that is for Oddmar, it gets transformed first when you see them as kids. The meter, the time signature changes to 3/4, and the instrumentation changes too. It has these pizzicato strings and very, very high-pitched percussion. It plays the melody in there, so it gives it a very childlike, character. And all of these are very stereotypical, which I think you have to be sometimes a little careful with, but this is a cartoon game about Vikings, so I think it works for this game. But okay, so let's just quickly listen. This is wait off. Here we go. And now it changes. Right, so it changes into this more kind of lush string orchestration. I think it changes time signature too, and it just gets a little bit more emotional when he's abandoned by his parents. Very sad. All right, real quick, I'll show you. We'll just do one of these, and then we'll have to move on, I think. So this is another adaptation, the same leitmotif. This is for a level in the game. I think I call this, the shield surfing reel. So it's a level that's a little bit faster in the tempo. You're kind of surfing on water. And this original title music with the leitmotif was way too slow. The tempo just did not fit that type of action at all. So this is much faster, different instrumentation. I think it's more, there's a lot of woodwinds here, which I like. That they're, when you're, I don't know, it just evokes, images of water, I think. But let's take a quick listen to what that sounds like too. Here we go. That was an incomplete loop. There's a B section to that too, but you get the idea. It's been rewritten, reorchestrated, different instruments to fit like a level with higher intensity. Okay, I think we're gonna skip these other themes here. They're great, but I think we need to speed things up a little bit, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the next step, but also something that you need to be aware of as you're writing music. You need to know what the possibilities are for adapting and having the music be more interactive. My neighbor is cutting something. I'm going to close the window. Hang on. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So these are all techniques that you can use within the middleware software to create music that responds to, you know, the decisions that the player makes, but you can also use them just to get more mileage out of your music. You can use them to, you know, make things more unpredictable, maybe less repetitive, stuff like that. Oddmar is a pretty linear game. You know, your options are usually limited from going from the left side of the screen to the right side. So there's all these things that I put up here we are doing in the game, although if this was like an open world type game, you would do much more of it, I think. But the basic technique is still the same. All right, let's start by looking at something that I call horizontal switching. So this is maybe the most basic, and it could be brutal way of moving from one cue or one piece of music to another, or moving between sections in within a composition, so like creating form. Makes sense. It's basically just like skipping a track on your playlist or something, if you do it in a bad way. So we're gonna load up Fmod, and I've created a special project just so we can take a look at these things. And just to see how this is done and what you can do to avoid. So what you don't want when you're switching between sections in a composition or between different compositions, usually you don't want there to be an abrupt change, like a click or a pop or a silence. You want there to be like a seamless experience. Otherwise, I think as a player, you probably kind of get, you know, the spell is broken somehow. So let's look at this in Fmod. All right, so this is a very, very simple thing here. The goal in this cue, this is from a short, like, bonus level. It's called the Dream World in the game. We can take a quick look too at what that looks like. So this is the level that we're talking about in the game. It looks like this. Ran into some mushroom. Not really. Probably hallucinating. That's what this looks like, just to give some context, so we're not just listening to music. So this is really simple in the game. There's one piece of music here that loops while the player is in that bonus level, and there's one transition that needs to happen, and that's to this little fanfare when you complete the level. So we can listen first to a little bit of the music. It sounds like this. saw there that once it reached the end here, I had a loop set up, so it just started over from the beginning. Okay, so at some point the player will complete this level or die. And then we want to hear this little fanfare here that sounds like this. Okay, super simple, and that's kind of composed using the same instruments and everything to give the feeling of being the same song or piece of music. So the challenge here is like, okay, so you finish the level, how are you gonna transition? You can't just start playing that other ending because for one, it's probably not gonna sync up. Like you have a tempo and a time signature in the music. So you want it to be on that grid, tempo to line up, but you might also want it not to end just at any quarter note or whatever the grid is. You want it to end at a specific place in a bar to give it for it to make sense musically. So real quick here, this is pretty simple. Most of you probably know this even, but this is set up so that there's a little marker here that says ending. So that's like a reference destination that you can go to. And then I have there's a better way to do this, I know, but I just did this so that it would be easier to look at. Then I have chosen that if the player completes the level, I want the transition to happen on the 4th beat of a bar. So this is a bar number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 subdivisions of that bar. I only wanted to transition on the 4th bar. The reason I want to do that is because I have created a crossfade transition that will start to fade out this track, the main track, on beat 4, so that it's quiet when you reach beat 1, and then I have my ending, which is lined up. It has a pickup, or I don't know what the correct word is, little lead-in here, so that beat 1, which is really what we're trying to line up, beat 1, starts here, but this is a little transition that leads us in, and once you hit an ending here, this one fades out, and this starts to fade in instead, so you get a crossfade. One goes down in volume, the other one goes up, and that way you get a seamless transition. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we can listen to that, what that sounds like, and I'll just mention one more thing in case you're wondering. So how this is, like I've said multiple times, this is the middleware. So how does this engine here know when to switch? So there's a value here that I've called it ending. So the programmer has to give me a value here. When that goes up to 1, or maybe it's over 0.5, I can't remember how I set it up. That, if I get that value from the Unity or whatever the program is, that tells this little program here to switch when it hits the next ending tag here and go over here due to crossfade. Okay, so let's listen, and I'll emulate the person finishing the level here. So once I tip this over to 0.5, that's when it will switch to the next ending. Okay. Here we go. And let's say he finishes now. So I lied, the trigger doesn't happen at 0.5, it's at 1. So you could see nothing happened. It didn't want to switch until I reached the value 1 here. And then whatever next ending was lined up it kind of took that path and went to the ending here. So this is a very simplified way to look at this. You could have much more going on, but I think this gives you the point.
So
the whole thing.
with Fmod, we do have a few questions, and but this one's very specifically about the
Not an
software.
Fmod expert. Just want to get that out there.
No, that's okay. Peter was actually asking if you used WWise or Fabric.
I do not know what those are. WIs?
WWise.
Oh, Wise. I think. Okay. Yep. Wise is another competitor to Fmod, correct?
That's a good question.
Yeah. No, it is. I don't know what the other thing was. Fabric. I'm not too familiar with that. I have to say that I am still learning a lot about Fmod. I'm pretty comfortable what it can do and how I need to work with my music, but for Oddmar, we had a company that helped us integrate sound effects in music, a Canadian company. So learned lots from them. Definitely, still learning a lot.
Perfect.
Yeah, I have to look at. Did you say Fabric? That was the other thing?
Yeah.
Fabric and Wise.
Peter followed up and said that, yeah, they're all audio middleware. So
I'm the only two that I've worked with would be Vice. I call it Vice. I don't know if it's B-Vice, Vice. It's WWISE. That's one, and then Fmod. Those are the two that I've worked with.
Awesome. Yeah, I did a quick search. I did find them. I'll get the links over to you. I mean,
perfect.
Another tool under your belt, right?
Yeah, that's something to look at.
Looks like there's another one that's called, it's like LMMS, formerly Linux Multimedia Studio. So, he took it back. Looks like there are a lot of options. Fantastic. A couple other questions I'm going to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
So we did have a question about like the Woodwind libraries. How do you make them sound like flourishes?
What a nice question. So I think what you mean by flurry would be like a quick arpeggio up and down, kind of like a scale. Is that what we're after?
That's a good question. Let's see what you can find.
So I think if you have a nice library, the way those work is basically some poor person devoted a lot of their time, sat down with individual players in a symphony orchestra, recorded each section and sometimes subdivisions of a section with all the players individually or in groups, and had them play like every note of their instrument individually. And then also having them play different kind of dynamics, different articulations, sometimes different effects, which I think is what this person is talking about. So some things are really hard to emulate with these libraries, because especially something that's really, really fast and has this kind of nice flow, legato flow to it, that just tends to, if you have a bunch of individually recorded sampled notes from an instrument, you try to trigger those really quickly, it tends to break the spell, and it sounds like a synth, because you hear something that can't happen in real life. You hear multiple things ringing out at the same time. And there are patches that kind of try to break away from that, but usually I think what this person is asking, like the really kind of quick arpeggio up and down, that's actually recorded. So you ask the player, hey, play this special effect, we'll record it, we'll put it in the sample library, and then I can trigger it. So let me just give you a quick example. All right, this should be pretty quick. I am gonna start up an instance of East-West, and we'll look at something like a flute. So these are all the libraries that I have with East West, and we want Woodwinds, Hollywood Orchestra, and we'll select the flute, and then you have different categories of articulations. Some of these are longer notes, some of them are more expressive, some of them you can switch between being with no vibrato or expressiveness to more vibrato. Some are shorter, and then you have also effects. Okay, so he or she might have heard something like, you know what, I'm going to choose a different library. I know this because I've done this so many times. This is not good. Let's choose.
It sounds like good libraries and knowing your library as well is one of the solutions to getting that good run or arpeggio.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out just a little bit. What did you say? Knowing your libraries?
Knowing your libraries and getting and having access to good libraries is kind of the solution to if you're having problems creating the exact run that you want or something like that.
Right. I don't know if he's or she's referring to what I said earlier about how your libraries will dictate what you write. So yeah, it's good to have many different libraries. My point though, I think is still valid. There are some things that are much harder and for a library to do, so you still tend to stick to those kind of things that sound well. But okay, anyways, piccolo flute, we'll do a piccolo flute, and we'll do the effects, and then we'll do an up-down. There we go. Okay, we're having some issue. There it is. Okay, so this piccolo flute player has recorded these arpeggio runs, and I'm just triggering the starting note basically. So an A, B. Yeah, so that would be hard to emulate because it has such a nice flow to it. But yeah, you need to know your libraries, and you need to just listen to all the different patches that you have, go through them, and kind of learn which ones you like, I think, and because it can be overwhelming. There's so many different options. Yeah.
It's incredible.
All right. Time. Let's shorten this a little bit again here. Let's look at let's just look at one more thing these are the two biggest things if you really break things down that you'll use, I think, in your middleware. So we talked about horizontal switching and how you can make that more seamless. So the other really, really obvious and common thing have things that are written to work together, different layers, different instruments, and you choose what layers to listen to or how to blend them together. So really, really common way of creating, getting more mileage out of music, but also adapting to, if you're in an open world, you're not engaged in, combat, you're not seeing enemies, maybe you have a slow pad-like or slow string layer or something, and then as you see enemies, you run into danger, you get more percussive layers that come in. So let's just look at one example, and then I think we'll try to wrap it up so I don't keep people all night. So this is a boss fight in the game. You can just look at it real quick. This is some kind of golem here, or I guess it's made out of stone. I don't know what that's called. but it's this classic boss battle. On the wrong slide, sorry. Here we are. There it is. So you're kind of trapped and you're fighting this boss, and sounds like this. So very percussive and aggressive, and this boss kind of has two different, there are different intensity levels that are triggered where he behaves differently. And he also has two states where he's left vulnerable in one state and you can hurt him, and then one when I think he's basically invincible in the game. So this is what that looks like if you try to put something like that in Fmod. Here's the boss. So you have three different levels that you can progress to. Level 1, 2, and 3. So those get switched between them. That's vertical switching. But then you also have, for each cue here in each level, you have 2 layers, right? So one, I believe, is all the percussion, all the noise, everything that gets your adrenaline running. And then the other one is a didgeridoo, I think, and maybe a triangle or something weird. So when he kind of when he's vulnerable and when he's kind of out of it, the percussive layer drops out, and so it's a way for the player to get some feedback too, right? So that they know that something has changed, just to reinforce that. So let's listen to this real quick. And again, so this has 2 triggers coming from the game engine. One is to progress between the different levels, and one is to trigger different layers. So I call this golem intensity. That's the different states that he's in, and then we have the level progress. And okay, so let's play it, and I'll switch between high and low intensity so we can hear what that sounds like. So I can blend them too. I don't think that happens in the game, but they're different layers of the same composition, so they do work together. And that's the whole point. A very nice thing about vertical mixing is that you can, at any point, we don't have to worry about, like we did with the vertical horizontal switching, about waiting for a certain time, certain beat of the music. We can just switch whenever we want, and they'll work seamlessly together, right? And we don't have to listen to this, but you get the idea. As you progress here too, you can have this here, this value, as that gets higher, I don't know what they're set to, I don't remember, it will switch. Something here worth mentioning too, I just wanted to mention this, that I kind of like about this, is as these 3 cues are basically variations of the same drum groove. And what I did is that I raised the tempo just a little bit for each intensity level. So you can see the BPM here is 128 for the first one. Then it will get a little bit faster and more frantic. And then again, level 3, even faster. But it's not done so that, I don't think it's more subconscious. You don't really notice it as a player, because it can be, if you overdo it, it will sound like an old 8-bit, game where it's too much, maybe, that the music speeds up as you're progressing. So I think that's a really good trick to create more intensity. Just sneak in a little bit of a tempo change. Let's just listen to that one time. You can hardly hear it, I think, unless you're really like stomping along. So let's switch. You noticed, but it did change a little bit there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I had some more examples loaded up here, but I think we'll have to stop here. Maybe we'll do a part 2 some other time. I don't know. But
I think yeah, that would be great. So just in as we're wrapping up here, we had a couple of questions, and I'm kind of gonna wrap them into one, I think, and it just kind of goes back to, I think, some of the things you were talking about in the beginning, but speaking as like a whole process, more or less, and creating music for a game, working with a team. Did you find with Oddmar and other projects you've worked on that you sort of get creative direction and go from there, and you create the music and you send it back, and it is a little bit, gameplay doesn't matter so much, or does gameplay and communicating with the designers and developers play a role in the creation of the music as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, that was going to be one of my things I was going to talk about to wrap this up. But
there you go.
So I think a really nice thing about the way this was maybe just by chance, but the way things worked out. But so because I was maybe brought on a little early in this process than I should have been. So what ended up happening, there wasn't a lot of gameplay footage or beta, alpha, whatever you call it, available to kind of test things against. So what I had was like artwork that, concept art. So I had lots of time just to think about these leitmotifs and these different ideas that would support the characters. And I had a general idea of the story that changed a lot too. But the leitmotifs for the characters did not. So because I didn't have a whole lot of pressure there. I could spend quite a lot of time. That really made things much easier. It just became easier and easier actually to write more music, and they would give me some directions, like a temp track or something. We want this to sound sort of like this for this level, and then I had my little musical ideas that would support the character or whatever it was, and I could quickly write something that would match what they were, or I would try to match what they were after. And by the end of it, when the cutscenes were done last, it was the last thing we did. And I don't know how many minutes that is, probably a pretty big chunk. Those went, I was shocked myself how quickly I could write those, just because I had solid musical ideas ready, just to kind of throw in there and make them support the story. I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, so lots of freedom to develop these themes and leitmotifs, and then had some directions once the levels were coming together, but also a lot of freedom. But they trusted me with the themes and all that stuff. I could do whatever I wanted basically with that. So.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was informed my levels were a little high, so I was just adjusting those. Thank you so much. This was incredible. I know, just looking at the chat, there were quite a few people who were very excited the whole way along, and I know we talked to you before, and something we typically do with our speakers is invite them onto our Slack after the presentation and to join our general channel and join in a conversation. If you guys have any questions for Pär, he is willing to answer them there, or we can relay them along. Either way, thank you so much. This was incredible, and I'm totally up for a part 2. That would be great.
Yeah, me too. If there's some interest, I would be happy to do it. I would love to. And thank you again to both of you, and to Karen too. I don't know if she's listening in, but for inviting me and just letting me know about the association too. So yeah, I'm really happy that we did this, and yeah, let's try to do part 2. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, you guys, we'll see you on Slack after this, and see you next month for our next presentation. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.